We are back now for the tail portion of the build for the Blade 550X. So what I have done is laid out all the parts that were inside bag T1, and these are all the parts that are in there, and this will comprise of all the components to put together the front tail case. So let's go ahead and work on putting the gears first into the bearings. And the way I would do this is to insert the umbrella gear first to these bearings. What I like to do is use the case without putting anything in it first. Position the bearings. Let me just make sure you guys can see this. I would position the bearings inside the guides. Close it up. And what this does is at least it gives the bearings, gives you something to hold on to when you insert the umbrella gear into them. It makes it so much easier. So there you go. So now if you open the case, it's on the other side, you'll see that it's nice and inserted now into the umbrella gear. Okay, so that is done. Next one is the drives here. So they have this brass tube that will go underneath here. It's a spacer. You would install the bearings down here, and another one up here, and it goes into the case right here. And that's how it is. It's very simple. And from here, the next steps are to get these posts inserted all through the tail case. And we can now close this up. And there you go. To wrap it up, we got the bolts to hold, to tighten down everything when you get the boom and torque tube inserted. But so I'm just placing them there, and just so it's ready when we need it. So, but I'm not going to be tightening those down. They're just going to be there for now. And the other bag here has all the small tapping screws when you insert this into the frame to hold it. So I'll put this aside for now, and what I'll do is put the lock nuts into it, and we have completed the front tail case. So we'll be back and we'll start putting together the rear tail case of the helicopter. So we are now at the part where we're going to be putting together the tail case, rear tail case for the helicopter. So the rear tail case came put together loosely, and all I did was remove each bolt, cleaned it with alcohol and put Loctite, and I just went around the whole tail case. Nothing special, pretty straightforward. Just make sure you clean the bolts to get all of the oil or residue off of it, so the Loctite has a better grip on it, and tighten everything down. So pretty straightforward. And on the next part of the build, on the manual, I'm sorry, it shows you that you install the tail fin into this tail case. But for now, I'll just leave it off. That you can do that anytime during the build. What I'll do is I'll just put this aside, and we'll go ahead and focus on the tail itself. So what I've done here is I've laid down in order how it should go in to the tail hub. So the way this works, oh, before anything else, I want to also I want to also mention is, before you start putting everything together, please make sure you clean the inside threads of the tail hub, and also the bolt that actually will go in here. We want to make sure that you get a good, the Loctite actually has a good grip, and make sure that that doesn't fling off or loosen up while you're in flight. So make sure you clean it. So the way this works is, and I'll go ahead kind of step through how everything goes in. You got, I'll Loctite it. You know what? I'll put that aside. We can do that later. That's not as key. The blade grip goes into the hub, and then all the lined up components right there, or parts, all go in a certain order. So before we do that, I wanted to show that the thrust bearing group here, and the thrust with the thrust races where the bearing rides on, there's two types of diameters, holes in the center. So one of them is looser, as you can see, it wiggles, and another one is much tighter. See, there's barely any wiggle, and that is the one that goes outside. So the way this works is, you got the blade grip first, followed by the washer, okay, and then the outer the thrust race with the bigger hole, and with the race facing out, okay, followed by the bearing, which I have already applied grease, and I like to insert it with the open face facing in to the hub, so the grease stays into the bearing longer, okay, and then followed by the race with a smaller diameter hole, with the race facing the bearing. So that's where the bearings kind of right on the groove right there. So, okay. And then finally, just the washer for the bolt, and the actual bolt right here. So what you do is you're gonna make sure there's Loctite on this. Okay, like so. Make sure it doesn't bleed out, as it will damage your thrust bearing. So make sure it's spread nice and thin, and then you just insert it. Okay, now what I like to do is insert another screw here, so I can kind of get a good leverage. Okay, so that is it. One side's done, nice and smooth. The ball here will actually go right here, and I will go ahead and apply Loctite on it. I just want to demonstrate it, illustrate it where it goes. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put together the other blade gear, put it all, install it all, and then we'll continue from there. I have completed putting the tail assembly together, and I just want to show everyone for reference. Everything's installed, everything's super smooth, no play. Same on the other side, no play. I mean, this is very high quality tail, and everything just fits so nice. The next step is assembling all this together into the rear tail case. And the first part here is sliding in the tail slider. and sliding this into the shaft. One of the build notes that I want everyone to be aware of is this helicopter is a leading edge tail control. So the way that works is this tail actually rotates counterclockwise, like so. So when you insert this, you put the links, the balls, in the front or on the front here, and this is how it's gonna snap on. Okay, so it's a leading edge, so which means the links are on the front while the tail is rotating. I mean the rotors are rotating. So let me just get this fixed properly. I already got a gob of Loctite on this grub screw, and this one don't be shy about putting a lot of Loctite. You never want this grub screw to back out and cause a crash. So let me just make sure I got this thing in properly. Okay, let's insert, set it on the flat spot. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier, this is a leading edge tail control. So you would snap the link right there, and then this other link right there. So it looks like this. Tail rotates this way, and then the links are on leading the blades. Okay, so we'll put this aside and continue on with the build. So we are now at the part where we're going to be installing this control lever for the tail slider onto the tail case. I've already screwed in the ball per the manual on the bottom right here. So I'm just going to explain how this attaches, because I think this might be a little tricky trying to show on camera how to install. So this piece goes over, installs here like so. And then what ends up happening is you put two screws there and they go into that groove, and which enables it to move the slider back and forth. What is to be noted here is the bearings. How you install it on this part is it comes with these four washers that I discussed earlier in the build as step washers. So one side has a step and the other side is smooth. So the way you're going to be installing this, just let me show it here, is anything that has all the steps are facing the bearing side, the radial bearing side. So like this will be here like this, and then the other bearings go like this. So all the sides with the step touches the bearings. So there's one washer here, one inside or two inside, and then another over here. Then you drive the long bolt through it. So I'll go ahead and install this, and we'll come back. So I've completed and installed all the tail parts. Just wanted to show everyone how the tail control lever works on the slider. So those two special screws or nuts goes through into the grooves, and what it does, it helps in controlling the tail. One also tip that I wanted to offer is anything that goes anything metal to plastic, like this ball here, there is an option if you wanted to put some sort of like adhesive, like Loctite, but do not use Loctite itself on metal to plastic. That's not the right way to go. What you can use is CA glue. Put a little bit of it on a thread, screw it in. When the CA dries up, it keeps metal to plastic. It bonds, and it's really nice, and you can still remove it when you want to. So if you ever wanted to do that, you can go ahead. I don't really I won't be using it on this helicopter because everything fits so nice and snug. So I'll leave it as it is. One thing I do want to point out is when you put everything together, make sure it is super duper smooth, like butter smooth. See, if you have a tail that has some binding when you're moving it, please hunt that down. You cannot have any form of binding, or it will result in like a tail wag when you're hovering. So this right here is like super duper smooth, and I don't expect any wag at all. But if you move that tail after you finish a build and you see that like it's grabbing on one area, you can start by taking part off one at a time to find out where it is binding. But this turned out great. So like I mentioned before, the tail is a counterclockwise rotating tail. So I got the tail blades oriented for counterclockwise. And like I mentioned before, this is a leading edge control. So the links are in front of the tail direction when it spins right there. So that's pretty much it for the rear tail case. And I've installed the fin. The reason I opted to install this last is it would have been in the way when you're putting this all together, like so. So making it last made everything, installing it last makes it kind of easier to set all of this up and then putting this on. All right, so this is complete. We will now move on to the next part, which is the tail boom and torque tube. So now we're gonna be putting together the torque tube, well, the bearings on the torque tube. As it comes from the factory, the torque tube is already pre-assembled, and the bearings are already inserted. So the only thing we have to do is apply a very thin coat of CA glue to the indicated positions, and you slide over them to affix them. So the manual is saying that you will be installing the first bearing at the 200 millimeter marker from one of the tips. So what that means is it's right over there, which I marked with a marker, and from there another 200 millimeter from that bearing, you install the second one, which is going to be over there. So the reason they offset the bearings and not equally put them on 200 from end to end is there's some rare instances that you do get some sort of harmonic vibration when everything is in the same distance in terms of having the positions of the bearing. This is kind of standard practice now for most helicopters with torque tubes. Is the bearings are always mounted somewhat off center, or they're different distances. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same. Do this off camera. Put a little dab of CA, very light coat and thin CA, because when you slide this bearing onto the CA, you don't want it oozing over and then getting into the bearing. Okay, so just put a very thin coat of CA, slide in the bearing, and you should be able to get it to stick fairly easily. I'll come back when that's done, and we'll continue. So I have inserted the torque tube after installing the rubber kind of housing or guide for the torque tube bearings. Just insert it on the torque tube like so, and we'll come back to this part later. So I have emptied out all the contents for bag T8, which is mostly the tail parts and the tail rod guide. So I just want to show you this part. The tail rod guides actually has two different size holes that will that basically will guide the rod, you know, keep them firm when they're moving. So what I would do is insert this first into the rod, like so, the front one being the larger one, and you know, the smaller one being the back. That doesn't matter at this point. Go ahead and insert that, then install your ends, which I'll just do lightly for now, and I'll make it, you know, tighten it up later. So the way this works, let's get this in here. So as you build your tail rod and you start installing the tail rod guide onto the boom. There you go. And right now nothing, I won't tighten anything, as you know, you would have to straighten everything out anyways when you install it on the helicopter. But please take note, this slot goes into the front of the helicopter, and the slot is actually facing on the left side of the helicopter. There's a small guide inside the front tail casing that this slides into. So this is the front of the helicopter. So the way this works is you slide that there, and then remember your tail rod guide that you created with the larger piece on one end and the smaller piece on the other end. So the way this works is it will be inserting into the guide like so, and then on the other one as well. So I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes right here. And you put the screws and tighten this down, and it'll hold those guides in. So that's how it works. The one with the bigger hole goes up front, and that is because the servo has, when it moves around its axis, it actually has some up and down movement. That's why there is that bigger hole for the front. So what I'll do is I'll put this all together, tighten them down, and we'll continue. So I have put together the tail loosely, tail fin, everything is loose right now. Tail rod guide, see, everything's just flopping along there, and everything's moving, guides are moving. So I did this because we need to insert the boom first into the helicopter, line up with this guide, and tighten down the boom, and then we can straighten out and position everything else in the tail. So that's what I will be doing. Make sure your 4 bolts here are nice and loose on the tail case, and just go ahead, you know, this, like I mentioned before, the slot is on the left side, front left side, and we will just go ahead and insert this, and make sure you get into finding that guide, and there it is, and just push it all the way in. So now we got the boom where it's supposed to be. We can tighten these the 4 screws to start clamping down on the boom, and then you can definitely start bringing in, you know, this and install it onto the base of the frame per the manual. So, and then you can line up the tail rod guides to get everything completed. So the tail case here will be my last piece to mount in the back. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll be back. I have completed installing the boom, tightening down the four bolts here that clamps onto the boom, that makes the front torque tube case clamp onto the boom. Lined up the horizontal fin, boom support, tighten it down on the frame, here on the side of the horizontal frame. So everything here is nice and tight, except for the guides. That's still kind of loose because I haven't really affixed or mounted the push rod right now. It's not installed onto the servo. So one more thing I want to show before I wrap up the tail portion of the build is when you insert, excuse me, the tail assembly into the tail. You see the torque tubes right here. It's pretty common practice now for most helicopters, is when you bottom it out when you first insert it, so when you push it all the way in, the torque tube is leaning on the umbrella gear on both front and back of the helicopter. This can cause vibrations if you leave it pushed all the way in. So what I do, or it's typical practice, is when you push it all the way in, is you back it, back the tail up just a hair, about a millimeter, and then tighten it down. So what that does is it gives the torque tube a little bit of area to move and not push the umbrella gears out, or create vibration if it's jammed in there. So that completes the tail portion of the build. I will come back and mount the electronics onto the helicopter and show you how to connect everything, and we'll move on from there.